come on stage. And Daniel is the co-founder of Conda, the Austrian platform, and they have very relevant experiences how to launch a crowdfunding portal successfully, and also he will deliver insights of the crowdfunding regulation and the crowdfunding development and how Conda works.
Thank you. Hey everybody, my name is Daniel. I'm one of the co-founders of Conda. I got infected by the e-virus 11 years ago, so I've started my first company 11 years ago, and back then there was almost no startup scene at all. There were no business angels, there was no crowdfunding, and so I've discovered all challenges on raising funds myself, and that was the reason why I started 6.5 years ago Conda. What we're doing is basically we do equity and lending crowdfunding. I'll come to that in a few seconds. And I'll try to show you how crowdfunding works on our platform, what we've learned in the last years, and what you should be aware of if you start your own campaign. Before I dig deeper, what is important to me is that you understand the different types of crowdfunding, because everyone is talking about crowdfunding, but nobody really differs between different types. So one main thing what you should be aware of is that there is crowdfunding like Kickstarter is doing, and how Indiegogo works, which is called usually like reward-based crowdfunding. So you pledge money and in return you get any reward, a t-shirt, a CD, or a smartwatch, for example. But this is not investing. Then you have donation-based crowdfunding where you donate money and what you get back is a good cause and a good feeling because you helped some organization or some people. And then there are these two things, which is equity-based crowdfunding, lending-based crowdfunding, where people invest in your company, and if your company is successful, the people get interest and get money back. So this is very important to go further and to talk about crowdfunding, because crowdfunding isn't crowdfunding. So be aware of the different types, and as you said, what you're doing is the first ever platform for equity crowdfunding in Hungary, which is super important, but which is also a pretty tough challenge from a regulator point of view. If we talk about crowdfunding, the market right now is growing super rapidly in the last years. So if you look on the numbers, in total in Europe, more than 10 billion euros got raised just in the year 2017. In the US, in comparison, 5 times more, it's about 50 billion just in the year of 2017. Right now, it's still increasing, and year by year, on average, it grows about 80%. So that whole new way of funding is growing, and it's getting more and more important. In Europe, if you look there, you see different numbers and different graphs. What is important is that mainly the market is dominated by the UK. So UK market is almost 70% of the whole market in Europe. And the top 5 countries are UK, France, Germany, Netherlands, and Italy. So Hungary needs to kind of start late, but run to the first places. What else do you see here? It's a bit tough for you back there, but this is the funding volume by country. And if we see here, for example, Austria, in 2017, there were around 30 million euros just in the country of Austria. For startups and small and medium enterprises through crowdfunding. So there's a lot of going on, there's a lot of things happening, but the challenge right now in Europe is that the market is super fragmented, so every country is doing their own stuff, and there is no legal perspective on the European level, and this is hopefully changing soon. So there are several initiatives on the European level to get a new law in place, which is called the crowdfunding service provider regime, where they want to make it better to also do cross-border financing. Because right now it's pretty a challenge for an investor from Austria, for example, to invest into a Hungarian company with that new law, which is currently under progress. This should be much easier, and this should be for every company much easier to raise funds on the European level. What happened in Austria when we started 6.5 years ago? You can imagine doing something what we do, an online platform where you can invest starting at 100 euros in startups. Everyone in Austria said, yeah, this won't work, do something else, work for a bank or something. So we had a lot of naysayers which said, yeah, just stop it. This won't happen. Nobody's interested in that. So when we started back then, there was no law in place. There were no people have any clue on the regulation side how to deal with crowdfunding. So what we did, we tried to convince them that this is good, but they said, yeah, we don't know, just start and then we will tell you if it works or not. So we had pretty risk at the very beginning because we had no clue if we did it right. We hoped that we did right because we paid a lot of money to lawyers. So that would be bad for our investors if it didn't work out. It worked out, and 2.5 years later, they created a so-called crowdfunding law / alternative financing law. Why is this important? Because with that own law, we managed in Austria to take crowdfunding out of a gray market into a regulated market, where we got much more serious and much more accepted by banks and other players in the market, and suddenly all of those which said before, yeah, you don't need that, said, maybe that's interesting and maybe that's a new way of fundraising for startups, for small and medium enterprises. I don't want to bother you too much. The main thing is what they defined were 3 areas. Area number 1 is there is a license for a crowdfunding platform. So if you want to run a crowdfunding platform, it's a licensed business. So if you do a crowdfunding campaign in Austria, check if the platform is licensed. Number 2 is there are different limits for companies which are raising money. If you do a campaign below 250,000 euros, you don't need to provide any structured and proven information. Between 250,000 euros and 2 million euros, there is a standardized information sheet what you have to provide and have to be proven. And more than 2 million euros, if you want to raise such amounts, you need to have a prospectus light. 5 million euros, you're in a prospectus regime where all the things are applicable to your company, same like you do an IPO or something like this. So this is regulated for the company, for the startup. For the investors, what they managed is the maximum investment amount. So if you're an investor and you want to invest in a company, you're allowed to invest per company per year, 5,000 euros. If you want to invest more, you have to do like a self-check, self-assessment. If you can prove that you have more funds, you can invest more. So these are the 3 areas which they managed to put in place. What's interesting, if you look on the numbers, this is just the Austrian market. It got in place end of the 3rd quarter of 2015, and just in the 4th quarter of 2015, 8 million euros got raised. So 3 months, 8 million euros compared to 4 million euros in the first 3 months, and then it all scaled up. So we've seen that regulating the market isn't bad at all. It just managed to bring crowdfunding into a new dimension on the next level, and I think that's super important for the whole topic, and that's what we've seen on the total numbers at all, that it's growing and growing and growing. So, how is Conda working? As I said, we're in the market for 6.5 years, so we did quite a lot of campaigns. We raised so far almost 30 million euros for 110 campaigns. We are live in 7 countries in Europe, which is the German-speaking area and some surrounding areas in the CE region, so Slovenia, Slovakia. We're currently starting operations also in Serbia, for example. So the European region is our main focus. We've also checked the UK, but based on the whole Brexit discussion, we stopped that so far. So, how do campaigns look? The cool thing is, it took us in the first year almost, I think, 8 months to raise 70,000 euros for one company. That was our first year. Right now we do campaigns where in the first hour we raise 200,000 euros. One of our fastest campaigns was Austria Vienna. It's a soccer club in Vienna. They've raised in 20 hours 1.5 million euros. We had several startups. So if you look, for example, KH, they do an anti-hangover drink. So if you get really drunk, you should buy KH. They were also part in the Austrian version of Shark Tank in Austria, and they raised within 6 weeks, I think, 750,000 euros, no, 4 weeks. So this is a startup. When they started on our platform, they were on the market for 2.5 years. and they managed to raise almost €1 million through the platform. And several others. We also had the second soccer club of Austria. They completely built a new soccer stadium, which was about €40 million, and they raised €3 million through our platform in 6 weeks for the new building of the soccer stadium. The cool thing is, for example, if you invested €500, there is a name tag on one of the chairs in the stadium, for example. So they managed to really create a buzz out of that to get money for the new stadium. Some other campaigns, really cool at the Alpine. This is not a startup, this is an existing small and medium enterprise. So what we've seen in the past is that crowdfunding, especially crowd investing, got more and more popular, not only for startups, but it got also more and more popular for small and medium enterprises which are already in the market. So what they're doing, they do cheap, premium ski hotels, like Motel 1, you might know, for ski resorts. They're running a chain of these hotels, and they financed one of the hotels through our platform. They raised at the end, I think, €1.2 million for one of their hotels and used our platform for fundraising. So, some other examples. You've heard we financed Kahe, the anti-hangover drink. So before the anti-hangover drink, we also financed a beer brewery of Munich. So we have the full supply chain, getting drunk, getting sober again. So beer always works, so if there are any microbreweries, just go crowdfunding, that works. But another cool thing, for example, is the Beer Chat. The Beer Chat is a fully automated brewing station where you get 6 hand-drawn beers within a few seconds, which is 4 to 5 times faster than you do it manually. So if you're, for example, doing a beer fest or you're an operator of a stadium, you increase the beer supply for your thirsty customers 4 to 5 times, which means 4 to 5 times more revenue, which means more happy people. And this is an invention in Austria. They've raised €500,000 through business angels. They raised another round on our platform with almost €600,000, and they got now Series A funding with about €3 million. So they really went through all the stages of getting funds. Another cool thing, and this is one of my heart projects, is the Wohnwagon. They do a fully wooden trailer, completely eco-friendly, completely environmental friendly. They did the first round with €70,000 through our platform. Then they worked. They grew the company. They raised another €200,000 on our platform, and now they are 26 people. They do 5 million plus in revenues, so they really managed to become a real company which is doing real business through our platform, and they use the platform twice. So this happens quite often, that companies don't use it just once, but maybe 1 or 2 years later they use it for another potential funding round. What is cool as well is, and that's especially for companies which are growing, is that they raised, as I said, €1.2 million, but the cool thing is with €1.2 million they've raised, they leveraged up to €8 million in other funding sources. So they get public funding, they get bank loans, so they got a cool mix of different financing sources, and that's super important. So if you think about crowdfunding, it's not doing angel investment or doing crowdfunding or doing VC and or doing crowdfunding. It's usually a combination which helps each other to grow the company most successful. What we also do, and then I'm almost done, is we license our platform to others to do their own crowdfunding platforms and crowd investing platforms. These are just a few examples. We are currently setting up a platform for the Red Cross in Austria, so they do their online fundraising in the future via crowdfunding on our white label platforms. And what we are also working on is the future of crowdfunding 2.0. We believe that there is a strong potential in using blockchain technology for fundraising in the future. So what we're currently working on is on security and equity token offerings, so the combination of existing financial instruments and blockchain technology. We did, for example, the first fully tokenized stock company in Europe. So what we did is we put our own company, Conda, completely on the blockchain. Each share is represented by one token. So if you go on etherscan.io and you type in Conda equity token, you will find a full tokenized share company on the blockchain there. We believe that this is kind of crowdfunding 2.0. It will take some more time, but we believe that the financial market of the future is going to be distributed and is going to be more democratized, and that's why we are working on that. So, thank you. Questions?
Yes, I have.
You have, okay.
Thank you. Who's your typical investor? You've told me a few stories earlier, and I would like you to share this with this audience.
Well, our typical investors invest below 500 euros, so 80% of our investors invest under 500 euros. Usually 75% are male investors. Every second investor invests in more than one company, so we see that people build their own portfolio. What we also see is that 80% of the people invest more locally, so they are in about 150 kilometer radius around the project, so it's something which is really community and locally driven. So if you think about doing your own campaign, understand your clients, understand your community, understand also where your company is based, because that's probably the most interesting part where you're gonna raise funds for your company, so be aware of that. And I think that's super important if you prepare a campaign, and what we've also learned is preparation is everything, so try to involve your community even though before you start a crowd investing campaign, because those people are usually like the first stage of engagement. And you have to imagine, if you start a campaign and for days there is no money flowing in, everyone is getting skeptic because they feel, okay, you didn't even convince your grandmother to give 500 euros, right? Why should I do? So that's like the main thing on the very first days, to convince mama, papa, all your friends and the family fools, so to make the first steps through that network. Yeah, and thank you. And for sure, what we also have, what we've created is like a lead investor concept, so we run a VC fund ourselves, and the VC fund sometimes is the lead investor, and we have an investment club, and out of the investment club there are lead investors which just invest larger amounts, 20, 50,000 euros for example. So they are also super important for first steps of the campaign.
Mr. Sabo, how do you build the investor club? So how do you network and what do you do?
My main job is to be on stages and talking to people, so 99% of building a club is my daily duty. So I'm like the Conda clown, being on stages and meeting people. No kidding, what we had is our main shareholder, they created their own investment club for 150 business angels. So they were the first 150 members, and our own community is up to 40,000 people, and out of these communities we recruited that investment club members. And the club is a real membership where you just pay 80 euros a month and then you're part of the club and you get really cool deals. Other questions?
Investor protection?
I like that question. Well, what we do as a platform is we do checks, we do due diligence and all those things. If you mean about investor protection, avoiding any risk for you, that won't work, because that's startup investments and you know how startup investment works, right? So what we commit, or what commitment we get from the companies is, during the preparation phase we get all the information for due diligence. We even do get a second opinion from an external analyst who says, okay, the company stated in their application, I have a patent, and they prove that they have a patent, because it happens that they say they have a patent but they just applied for one, which is something different. So that's done in the checks. after raising successfully the money, the companies are committed to give quarterly reports, so they keep you up to date. And if there is an angel investor or lead investor involved, he is working much closer with them because he's much closer involved, he's helping them with the network and blah blah blah. So that's like the main thing. What we don't have for the crowd is they don't have any voting rights or those things. That's our model. They are more like silent partners, but they are not they don't have any voting rights or something else.
So it's more of a nominee structure.
Yeah, exactly. It's like trustee who is like synchronizing all the interests. But for the company, it was super important that they don't have to ask hundreds of people for small decisions. So that's why we also have this lead investor structure, that he's taking care of those things, and that's why they are like having something like phantom shares.
Tradability?
Nope. Right now there's Adis here. He's lead investor for Fundabeam. They have something like a secondary market where he's giving you insights about. We're working on it, but within the European Union, under the European framework, it's pretty hard to create a secondary market. That's also one of the reasons why we believe in using blockchain for those things, because you can do with much lesser transactions, transaction cost, much easier transfers. So that's why we're working in that part on the secondary market.
Not even the mailbox? Not even the mailbox, I mean just...
Yeah, you can do an OTC trade always. So they are transferable but not tradable, which is what I've learned. I'm not a lawyer. There's a huge difference between transferability and tradability. So yeah, they are transferable.
Okay, but do you help those transfers or not?
OTC, yeah, we help, but there is no book building, price building, anything else.
What service do you provide for your prospective campaign initiators? How is the process? How long and what steps do they have to do in order to launch the campaign?
Yeah, so we have, as I said, like a several step application process. The first process is get in touch with us, giving us a pitch deck or something else, and then one of my people in the analysts team is going through those infos and is checking if your company from a basic understanding fits to crowd investing. Usually that's a dropout quote of 80%, because you can imagine we get every stupid idea you can imagine. So really everything. You can't imagine what we get. So really, no, I should write a book about it. So after that first check, there are 20% left. And then we have pretty much the same process as you have if you talk to a business angel or if you talk to VC funds. So we're going through the deck, we're going through the numbers, we're going through the other stuff like how's your cap table, what other contracts are there, and blah blah blah. Often, to be honest, we get a lot of recommendation by lead investors, by our friends from the club, because they are often already invested and they need more money for the company, so we also use their information. At the end, within the last 6.5 years, we got more than 5,000, 6,000 applications, and we financed 110 companies. So you see, it's really a small funnel at the end. But if a company gets on our platform, we have a 95% success rate. So if you're on the platform, you probably raised the funds you're gonna search for, but you have to get on the platform. Nevertheless, I would say 70 to 80% when companies apply, they don't, even though if we want to get them on the platform, they don't manage to get on the platform out of their own mistake because they don't prepare anything, or they get bankrupt before they raise money, or yeah, it happens. Because the process, as you asked, the process usually takes from 6 weeks from first contact to being live to up to 6 months, because you have to prepare a pitch deck, you have to prepare your information, you get questions by my analysts, and then they start asking why you said you haven't patent and you just applied, and then it gets more and more difficult. So as better prepared, as faster the process, as faster the money comes in. So that's I think, the easiest way to explain. Usually, on average, it takes about 2.5 months.
Do you know which section of the campaign is mostly popular with investors? Is it video? Is it financials? Or
It's a combination of video and executive summary. So everything what you can tell in 90 seconds, you can't tell in 2 hours. So be precise, be sharp, and be understandable. We had really, I think, every part of industries. We had B2B companies which successfully raised money. We have building and construction companies. So we had really almost everything you can imagine. As better the pitches and as better the first, like, I would say 4 or 6 sentences are, as more interested the people, as better you manage to do the first 3 days of a campaign, as more money you're gonna raise. If you have any well-known lead investors, that also helps. So there are some puzzle pieces what we know which help to be successful. And the cool thing is there are usually hundreds of people which invest, so you can't say this is more important than this, because there's also a Q&A section, for example. And you probably find in every campaign one guy who loves spreadsheets, and then he's challenging every number. That happens, so you should at least understand your own numbers to answer those questions, because if you invest 100, 1,000 or 10,000 euros, the people have a right to understand what you're aiming to. Usually that discussion helps companies to convince people, and what we always do is we also combine our online platform with offline pitching events, so people can get in touch with the companies, ask questions in person, meet them, and those things. So it's a combination of different initiatives by the company to be successful on the platform.
Do you give announced rewards to investors as well?
Thank you. Yeah, even though that crowd investing is not reward-based crowdfunding, what we've seen is that if you give additional rewards, it helps that people invest more. So for example, if you get rewarded, we had a bicycle company, if you invested there 2,500 euros, you get a bike. Which helped that many people invested 2,500 euros and not 500 euros because they got a bike on top. So those rewards on top help that people invest more, that people maybe invest not 300 but 500 euros because 500 euros is the reward. Or for the soccer stadium, if you're a super soccer freak and your name is in the stadium, you're gonna cry. So that's why many people invested 500 euros plus, for example. So that's the reason why we always advise companies to do that. If a company starts on our platform, they get, we call it cookbook. So they get a cookbook how to set up your perfect campaign, and so they are well prepared to raise money successfully.
any exits so far?
Any exit? Yeah, several one. So the last one was just a few months ago, and the people got return per year 44%. But we also had some bankruptcies to be open, so we also had that because that's also part of the game. But we have a default rate which is below 15%.
Are you involved in pricing, or is the company's own idea?
You mean pricing slash valuation?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We advise them on stupidity, so we try to avoid that they do stupid decisions. But at the end, it's their offer to the investors. So it's not. We don't do any valuation ourselves because that's a liability issue and the issue on getting sued for that. So no, we don't. But we tell them if it's stupid, and we advise them if there's a lead investor who invested 3 months ago for 2 million euros pre-money valuation, you won't get 3 months later 10 million as a valuation. So, and we've learned, for example, in the German market, some of our competitors there, they just didn't care about valuation, so they all had the problem that for a next round, they had so high valuations that they didn't got any full-on funding, so they get bankrupt. So we try to help them a good in-between mix. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniel.
Okay.
Okay. Our next presenter is Madis Muur from Estonia, who has a very special personal story, also